Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, dear participants. Welcome to our manufacturing panel 2020 of the HIGHTECH VENTURE DAYS. Hello to the world. Hello to Dresden. I'm located here in Frankfurt, and I also would like to welcome our panelists, namely Franziska Bossart from ABB, Sven Harmsen from Saint-Gobain, and Charles Holtsclaw from TechnipFMC. I'm very honored to be your host today, and I would like to introduce me and my company, Blue World Group. I'm the CEO and owner of the Blue World Group. We are a small family office coming from a company that I founded and sold in my mid-20s, which was in automation and software. And then I started to invest in startups, and now we have more than 15 portfolio companies. Huge variety, and we are a very sustainable investor. We are not looking only for profit, but also that our portfolio companies meet some bigger purpose and also being sustainable in all dimensions. I would like to start this panel with the short introductions also of the panelists, and I would like to ask Franziska to do so.
Yes, so hello to everybody at Dresden, of course, in particular. I love the city, by the way. I went there about 10 years ago and really loved it. And to the rest of the world, to Europe, of course. So I'm representing ABB today. ABB is a technology leader with 130 years of experience. We are active in four main areas. One is electrification, then industrial automation, motion, and robotics. We have a corporate venture arm that has been in existence for 10 years. I would say probably one of the longer ones that have been around. So we have had the strong backing of our management to go ahead also in times of crisis and keep investing and doing venture investments. We are focusing on the areas that are basically adjacent to our industries. It's the future cities, buildings and homes. So automating the built environment, but changing how we move, the future of transport, and of course, the future of industry. Our typical check sizes is between 500,000 and 3 to 4 million, can also be a bit higher than that, but that's a typical size. And we have a portfolio of 26 companies in these different areas that I've mentioned before, and it's basically a global portfolio, so we invest worldwide. Maybe a couple of words about myself. I've joined ABB in 2006, and I've held various roles with increasing responsibility in industrial automation and in power grids, in business development, innovation management on the country level, and also leading large global transformation programs. And the past 3 years, I was based in the Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area. I was part of our digital management team, leading a global program where we have developed and deployed over 60 digital solutions and deployed them to the market. And about a year and a half ago, I joined our venturing team as well, where I'm responsible for VC fund investments and direct investments. I've also been on the board of pretty big institutional investment fund where we have 10 billion assets under management for about 7 years, where I served as a director. That's about me.
Great, thank you. Very impressive. So may I ask you, Sven, to also introduce you and Saint-Gobain? You're muted. Sven, I think you have to unmute.
Yes, thank you. I knew it would work wrong. Anyway, so thank you for having me at this panel. My name is Sven Harmsen. I'm Director External Ventures at Saint-Gobain Nova. I'm originally a chemist, worked in various companies from startups to large corporations, the last almost 10 years now in corporate venturing. A little bit about the company Saint-Gobain, which I joined last year. Saint-Gobain is a global materials processing company. We serve mainly the building and construction industry. Actually, the history of the company is glass. The company is more than 350 years old, and we started with the Palace of Versailles to make the mirrors more than 350 years ago. Now we are serving all kinds of materials for this market, from roofing, tiles, drywalls, insulation materials, siding, and so on and so on. Other markets we are serving is automotive, aerospace, life science, and many industrial applications. For example, we have an abrasives and a ceramics platform. I'm personally working for a unit called Nova, which is our gate to the startup community. So we initiate partnerships, we consider investments. Investment size is typically between 100,000 to about 3 million in size when we do our initial investments. We are open to lead rounds or simply co-invest. We take board seats occasionally. Geography is really global. Our currently about 20 portfolio companies are spread across the globe, from Brazil, Northern America, in Europe, UK, Germany, France, and so on, all the way to China. What else can I tell you? I think I leave it with that. Everything else we can discuss later on.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Charles, I would like to hand over to you to introduce also yourself.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm Charles Holtsclaw. I'm the early investment manager for TechnipFMC's external technology engagement team. So I've been with the company for a couple of years now, and I have somewhat of an unconventional background, from the U.S. military to university research administration and tech transfer to private equity, and now to oil and gas. So very quickly about TechnipFMC. As most know, we're a global leader in the energy industry. So we deliver projects, products, technologies, and services. We have 37,000 employees, 48 countries, 19 revenues, about 13.5 billion USD. We're organized in 3 business segments: subsea, surface, and Technip Energies, and we're pretty uniquely positioned to deliver great efficiency across project life cycles, from concept to project delivery and beyond. And my focus, when it comes to internal innovation, we all know that in a large corporate environment, it's notoriously cumbersome. So my team's purpose in the company is quite straightforward. We accelerate the pace of innovation by leveraging external ecosystems. And this event today is one example of how we do that. We typically engage seed to B stage companies. We don't lead. We like to say we're fast followers. And more specifically, we focus on 4 main verticals. So one is emerging materials. Think methods and materials around making our products lighter, cheaper, more corrosion resistant, better for harsh environments. Digital, fusing our traditional domains of products and projects with digital innovations. Industry 4.0, that real cyber physical revolution involving robotics, autonomous systems, intelligent connected assets. And last but not least, the energy transition. So that takes a variety of forms, from carbon management of production facilities, electrification, localized power generation, green and blue hydrogen, and the list goes on, of course. On the corporate venture capital side, so my main focus is sourcing early stage companies with disruptive tech and assessing their potential strategic value to our core business. But I also have the latitude to look at things that would potentially take us beyond oil and gas. So it's very interesting in that regard. And these days, post-COVID, not post-COVID, intra-COVID, with forecasts constantly being revised and budgetary constraints, I look for non-capital intensive ways of engaging with those companies. So that can take the form of various collaboration models, joint ventures, and so on. And regarding our theme today, manufacturing, we have a massive portfolio of products: flexibles in France, Brazil, Malaysia, umbilicals in the UK, Angola, Singapore, Brazil, and so on. And we're well known as the world's leading manufacturer and supplier of subsea tree production systems. So with that, I'm looking forward to the panel.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your introduction. I think we have a very exciting and interesting panel here with huge corporates from different fields, also from different parts of the world. I mean, we have me here situated in Germany. We have someone from Switzerland and 2 from the United States. I think it's amazing to being here together. For the audience out there, whenever you have questions, please feel free to type in and to also to involve with us here in the panel, and just feel free to ask whenever you like to. First of all, I think it makes sense that we start with some strategic questions where do we see the market, and what are the challenges right now, and also from a technological perspective, what is in our point of view the upcoming development which we should face, and then coming over more to the startups and also getting a better understanding what we're looking for, what are the trends, and especially what are the technologies big corporates or small investors are looking at the present. So just giving, of course, some COVID insights here. I mean, we in Germany, we are luckily, our economy is quite strong, but of course we all feel COVID. We have some huge challenges here. The manufacturing industry, nevertheless, we had also some challenges already before COVID. I mean, the automotive industry is also one example, which was also challenged before the COVID times. And nevertheless, we are here at HIGHTECH Venture Days to speak about technology, to speak about ideas, and getting used to people who want to make the world even better. So in my point of view, we should see more the chances and what that technology can bring to us. We have some very nice developments in the last years, just to mention a few. I mean, Industry 4.0, AI, 3D printing, however you name it, and what is out there. There are so many things which could make the world a better place, and we can use for us, and also for making manufacturing more relevant and just better, more efficient, and using less resources. So speaking about that, I would like to ask our panelists what are, in their point of view, the most relevant market trend these days. I know it's a very difficult question, as there are so many out there, and to choose one is quite challenging. Nevertheless, I would like to let us try to let's focus on one. And if I could phrase it, second question, I also would like to ask them then what do they do in their corporations to face such a trend and the development of it. So Franziska, may I ask you again? So what is the development and market trend which is the most relevant one you would choose?
Sure. Do I need to start because I'm a lady or because I'm Swiss? I don't know, but I take it as a compliment. Look, so I see. Well, first of all, the general trend of digitalization, right? We are dealing with ongoing digital shifts, deep shifts. On the one hand, in big data, we are going from data created mostly by consumers, e.g., phones, laptops, etc., to an explosion of data volumes from mobile devices, Internet of Things, and the proliferation of sensors. Then cloud and edge computing, we are going from on-premises storage and computing, very important in our traditional industries, where public cloud is still something that in utilities and other traditional industries, people are still a little bit worried about. From on-premises storage and computing to cloud plus and edge driven by 5G and AI. So really turning data into insights. And again, that's an ongoing transition. And in some industries, you may think, more advanced industries like IT, you may think that this transition is already over. But when you talk with manufacturing companies, that's a transition which is happening now and probably slower than some would expect. So big data, cloud and edge computing. Then the third big digital shift, communication and connectivity, where we are going from an isolated, limited bandwidth and speed wireless communication to always connected, fully integrated, and usable in critical applications. So communication, connectivity everywhere. And then the fourth big shift is from virtual and augmented reality, going from a separation of the virtual and the real world to combining real world and digital information to increase efficiency and effectiveness. And that can be with a digital twin, augmented reality, with all its different use cases and applications like trainings, etc., and virtual reality. I would say virtual reality probably is the least advanced in the manufacturing world. But so these are the trends, and the ongoing digital shift on the one hand, which I guess we are all dealing with and is covering all of us. Then more specifically, maybe for the areas where ABB is active in, as mentioned before, it's electrification, industrial automation, robotics, and motion. In electrification, we are basically a provider of full range of protection, control, and measurement products. And what we see there is really going from, let's say, dumb devices to intelligent devices. So rather just having a dumb switch, right? We are having intelligence built into that, which is then obviously allowing us to provide what we are talking about, intelligence building, intelligent, buildings, smart cities, smart buildings, etc. So where we integrate, let's say energy forecasts, but weather forecasts into HVAC use, etc. We can also see a move towards more probably power electronics rather than electrical mechanical switching. A lot more common standards, and then maybe talking about smart buildings, we can see upcoming trends such as comfort of the buildings, air quality, maybe not as important in Europe, but certainly very important in California, where I've spent the past 3 years, big topic, but also in countries such as China, where you have air pollution, but also security, and then now, of course, with COVID, because you mentioned it also, visitor control, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's maybe the electrification, maybe something else, a big trend that we can see there for electrification, which is obviously super important, is the complexity of distributed generation and power generation and power consumption, where, of course, as a Tesla owner, you want to create your own energy on with your solar panels on your rooftop. So that's a completely new model of how we generate and consume power compared to the previous world, right? And the networks are not necessarily built for that. So a lot of challenges there. Then maybe in industrial automation, and I try and be a bit brief so that the others can also talk, but we see a disruption of the traditional automation stack due as well to industrial IoT. We see the convergence of technologies, of information technologies and operations technologies, the famous convergence of IT, OT. That were technologies like PLCs, distributed control systems, where ABB is very strong in SCADA, so on the supervisory and control level, MES, that traditionally were separate systems that are now merging closer together, which also creates competition, innovation, and disruption. And another very, very important trend that we see, and this is super important for us and our customers, is industrial cybersecurity. When we talk about cybersecurity, mostly we still talk about IT cybersecurity. That is where most vendors play, but industrial cybersecurity, of course, has a growing importance. And then maybe the last aspect, robotics, and then please switch over. That's our third important area. Of course, we see an increase in warehouse automation and logistics. You can all see that, right? We all sit at home, so we order more and more parcels. But we also see a couple of other trends. We see, for example, no-code programming, which is getting increasingly important, or easy-to-program systems. That's about it. I have a couple of other trends, but I try to.
Sure. But if you need to focus on how could I imagine how the process at ABB work? Is it like you have one focus where you say, okay, this is one mega trend, whatever we see here in technology coming up, like new startups or something, we really search for them, and we really would like to cherry pick the one, and this is where all our attention goes to? Or is it more like I would say, opportunistic approach where we say, okay, we have such 50 trends and developments, and let's see what comes to us?
Yeah. So, and I'm answering your questions as honestly as I can. So we have investment themes and focus areas, and I mentioned some of them: the future of cities, buildings, and homes, the future of transportation, electrified transportation, of course, plays a big role, the future of industry. So these are our investment themes, right? And in these themes, we search. Ideally, what you would do, of course, you would do a deep dive, you would do an industry analysis, you would look into all the different players, you would, look at the category leader, try to figure that out with voice of the customers interviews, etc. Is that how we do it? Unfortunately not. We just don't have the resources for that. So in a way, it is opportunistic to a certain extent in the way that we are being contacted. We get inbound deal flow, or through our VC funds where we have contact, or our business units come to us and bring us some companies that they collaborate with or that they know. We look at them, and then of course we do a market analysis and we look at the different players, but that's more how we work rather than doing, really deep dives where we spend a lot of time on sector analysis and players.
So how's it with you, Sven, at Saint-Gobain? Is it the similar approach, or are you more focused on specific topics?
Well, Franziska gave already a whole bunch of interesting topics. I think we can all agree that the digital and big data is one of the big trends, and especially now the COVID situation, it got another push, and everybody wants to control everything digitally. Ideally from home or from whatever office, wherever you are in the world, you want to see where is your production line, is there a problem, is there an issue, do I have to work on it right now? And basically now we have the tools, and when 5G is available everywhere, it's even better. Everything is connected, and communication and everything is much better. So there is plenty of opportunity, but maybe I try to cover a different aspect here. And I mean, working in a very old company, we still have these pictures how they made glass like 350 years ago. That was so different. But nowadays, we have very modern production facilities, and still I believe there is a lot of room to further improve it. And for many decades, it was you have your product, you develop your production process, and you build your production facilities, you have your own secrets, how you handle it, and you just do it. I think today it's different. You don't do it just by yourself. It's not just I buy one machine and I do it everything else by myself. Production and manufacturing today is really a partnership approach, and you need so many different technologies. And yeah, you mentioned already so many of them where we need additional technology in the robotic space and in the digital space, AI, AR, machine learning. It's so broad that nobody can do everything by him or herself. And I think that's, on the other hand, a great opportunity to really have a better setup. And maybe one other aspect that was not mentioned before, we look to optimize everything all the way to the end of the process, because you have your product, but what is the rest? So you have waste. So recycling and waste management is another big topic for us to improve a production.
Yeah, makes sense. So Charles, so handing over to you, what is your view on that?
Yeah. So a lot to follow there. But as the lone American on the panel, I have to say that my perspective, I mean, everybody sees what we're dealing with. It's election season. COVID is entering its second, third, or greater wave in many of our cities. So there's just a constant air of uncertainty, right? So when it comes to my industry in particular, I mean, I live in Houston, and so we live and die by the price of a barrel, and it seems like a good chunk of the city's laid off. There's a lot going on, and a lot of concern about the future. The IEA has come out and said that we're going to feel the effects of COVID on our industry for at least a decade. So really the question becomes, how do we pivot? And I think that's something TechnipFMC has historically done very well. We are a service provider, and so we look first and foremost how to transform our clients' project economics. And so to do that requires constant innovation and a willingness to be flexible when things like this come up. It's the only way to survive. And so starting at the highest level, I guess, in terms of market trends, separating that a little bit from the technology side of things, I think, given the theme today, traditional manufacturing, I think it's ripe for disruption. Clients are wanting integrators in a cost-sensitive environment. They are much more sensitive to things like on-time delivery. There's no margin for error. There's and they have the ability to just be a lot more discerning and a lot more. They have a lot more choices perhaps than they did. Technology is one way for us to address that, but there was a recent Deloitte report that says one way of addressing this manufacturing disruption is actually cleaning house. So the companies are utilizing or looking to utilize M&A divestitures to really streamline business and operations, and really kind of realign around key markets and key customer segments. So again, a lot of this is speculative, but I think we'll be seeing more of that going on. Partnerships between traditional manufacturers and digital enablers. It's, as everybody knows, it's hard to create a lot of these things in-house. Yes, we have R&D, but it's little r, big D, right? Like we develop, but we aren't focused on creating these digital products, especially when they exist in myriad forms globally. So, bringing these partnerships together is a really big trend. I think it's going to have an exponential effect on value creation going forward. Talking about the influx of data, I mean, we have sensor stacks galore. So for me personally, I mean, I see probably 300 unique startups a quarter, just me. And I mean, every other one has a new sensor that's going to provide me new data that's going to do these amazing things for our production. I mean, just terabytes and terabytes of data. But what we really need to figure out is how to clean it and digest it in a meaningful way. And I don't think that's been addressed very well. And I think that'll come up later when we talk about what the startups can bring to us going forward. Again, COVID, I don't want to be like a broken record and just keep talking about COVID, but it's obviously important. HSC is a big trend. So exposure, sanitation, obviously are huge concerns. Think like field service, demand for better first-time fix rates, getting people in and out, supply chain visibility. As liabilities increase, companies are going to need to be more aware of the entire supply chain, how to deal properly with issues and claims. And, perhaps another thing is reshoring, which I've seen some numbers on, but I think given what's going on and given the fact that it's not going away anytime soon, bringing imported goods and materials back to domestic production, COVID may be a tipping point for that, especially as, the typical offshoring countries become, better in terms of prosperity. That value begins to disappear. Increasingly complex manufacturing methods, as they become leaner, more automated, you have to have the proper infrastructure in place. And a lot of times that's going to be in the bigger nations like ours. And thanks to robotics and automation, frankly, it's changing the labor force. We aren't going to need as many people on the shop floor or around the company as we once did. And ultimately, I think it's going to be a learning experience for everybody else. We're learning we're already seeing how to learn to stop and restart services and activities quickly, which historically hasn't been a concern. Typically, you could wind something down and then slowly ramp up, and everybody was on the same page. But now, you get a positive test result, and everything's cut off. You may have people on a vessel at sea for however long, or people in remote locations that you have to figure out how to operate with those challenges. And real briefly, cut me off if you need to, if we need to move on to the next topic. But in terms of technologies, I mentioned the data, the wealth of data that we get. There's no problem gathering it, but really, it's one of the big concerns is preventing asset failure, right? So predictive analytics solutions are huge. We have in Singapore, we're piloting a manufacturing optimization management initiative. So really allowing complete transparency at every level of the manufacturing process for particular focus on efficiency. I think Franziska mentioned, connectivity, smart factories, and so on. Being able to leverage the automation, AI, ML, all of these different things. We need robust and reliable networks. I think Ericsson said something by halfway through this next decade, it's a $113 billion addressable market. I know there are some excellent companies out of Canada and out of Northern Europe addressing it, but that's going to be big. And I'll leave it. I'll leave it. Additive manufacturing is a massive, massive topic for us. I could spend the next hour talking about it. I won't. I'll stop there. But that's going to be huge. That's going to change how we do everything, especially in a time of remote work that we're in right now.
Yeah, I think what you have said is quite interesting, especially in some of nearly in every field. COVID will accelerate the progress and the technological development and everything. I mean, automation is a good example. In future production processes, automation will play a completely different role because we would like to be more independent from positive test results, etc. And the whole supply chains, which now relies on manual work sometimes, it's just not from a risk point of view, it's just not the right time now to rely on the people, and we need some solutions. I think it's a huge chance, to be honest, especially for the automation industry and for the manufacturing industry in general. So, in your point of view, Charles, just asking you first, what role play a startup in your view on that? I mean, is it some player, or I mean, Sven, you said we need to rely more on partnerships, and is it more like a partnership role, like startups play with you, or how can I imagine how you work with your portfolio companies?
Yeah, so I mean, from the beginning, corporate venture capital is almost a misnomer for what we do. We are purely strategic in our approach. So unfortunately, given my background, I can't walk in, to an investment committee and say, hey, we're going to get like a 15x out of this. They don't care. That's not what we're looking for. So the reason and the methods behind engaging with a startup is really to provide that strategic impact to the core business. So briefly about the method, how we bring them in. So obviously, I mean, I have deal flow coming from absolutely every direction, right? Like, please take a look at this and whatnot. And so I will typically meet with the founders, do an initial assessment of the technology. But keep in mind, I know a little about a lot, but I'm not a specialist in any one of these technologies. So I lean very heavily on our business units. So one of my primary responsibilities really in this team is to find that champion in the business unit, whether that be subsea, surface, Technip Energies now with process tech and things like that, and really sell it, make those connections, and try to find a place that perhaps we could pilot, validate that technology. And that's part of our value proposition to the startup, saying even if we don't come in and take a stake of your company, what we can provide is access to our global sales channels. We can put you on an active project that's going to be incredibly visible. It's going to prove, validate your technology, and it's going to lead to just results you would never have gotten with a $1 million investment, and then see you at the next board meeting. So we're looking at a much tighter knit relationship with the companies that we work with, because they're essentially becoming part of the team. They have to work well with our engineers and vice versa. We provide, whether that's engineering man hours, lab space, whatever, it's real co-development for their solution to work in our field, and for us to be good curators of the technology as well to help them grow and scale appropriately. And if I could, I see Alexander had a question there. If COVID leads to changes in your supply chain policy, does that mean European startups are less relevant? Absolutely not. I would never suggest such a thing. We're domiciled in London, major operational headquarters in Houston and Paris. And with Technip Energies, not to get too far over my skis, as you know, that's in preparation for a spin out. I'll leave it at that as things are in development. Right now, at the moment, we are one company, but we are global. And so for certain applications, it might be better to have North American startups. But we have such a heavy presence in Europe that I would be remiss to say that they would become less important somehow, especially given our relationships and our facilities in the UK, major manufacturing facility in Le Trait, all over Paris. So the short answer, Alexander, is no. We're still very, very interested in the European ecosystem.
Sure. Sorry, Rigbert, if I jump in here, but let me challenge you a little bit on that, and let's have a bit of an interesting conversation here. You said that, and we of course claim exactly the same. That you try to find a champion for a business unit or in a business unit, and then you give the startup access to validate your technology, to pilot, give them access to a global sales channel, right? That's what you said, and of course that's what all the corporates say, or claim, and that's of course what the startups are interested in. The highly successful startups don't need our capital. We all know that they get capital on the market, but what they want is access to our distribution channel. So now let me challenge you on that. Are your distribution channels, are your sales managers, key account managers really willing to take an unproven technology of an early stage startup that has a high risk of failure, bankruptcy, and take that to the market, building their own products, technologies platform on top of a very early stage or early stage startup, and risking their own customer relationship?
Phrased that way, no. But I mean, just quite frankly, no. I mean, we would never take an untested, unproved TRL 2 or 3 to a key account manager and say, hey, take this to Equinor, put it on, in full production mode, and let's just run with it. There is an interim step there where we would perhaps, let's just take a subsea example. Maybe we take that technology to Aberdeen first and put it through its paces in a testing pool, or we do what we need to do to get it to a level of confidence that is necessary before taking it to a key account manager like that. And that the champion in the business unit isn't necessarily the CAM, right? So I'm not going to immediately go to them and say, take this to Equinor, take this to Total, take it to Chevron or whatnot. It may be worthwhile at the beginning just to go to the engineering team, or depending on the stage of the project, and say, can we test this on a non-critical aspect of this project first? If it's successful, let's increment and slowly move it forward. It's much easier to do, as you know, with digital solutions, because they're in and out. If it doesn't work very well, we already have something in place, obviously. When it comes to hardware, or more labor-intensive things like that, we're obviously much more discerning. But yeah, definitely the initial phrasing of your question, of course not. We couldn't risk those kind of relationships with untested technology. But one of the part of the value proposition is the fact that we have the resources and the leverage to prove those technologies out relatively quickly, and much quicker than a startup could do on their own.
No, and I just, sorry, and then but I just think, I want to deconstruct a little bit, and of course this was all a little bit exaggerated, right? That's what makes discussion fun. But I also feel like let's have an interesting panel here, right? And I think the startups in the audience want to hear some, not just table stakes messages that they get from everybody. But so I just want to deconstruct a little bit the myth that or the hope that maybe a lot of startups have that they can get access to the corporates, to this distribution channels, etc. It won't happen so easily, but I fully agree with you, Charles, and we do exactly the same. That we do prove it, that we may give them access to our own factory and try something out there. So I think the way you described it, that made a lot of sense, and I think that's probably the reality. And it's still beneficial, I would say, for most startups, but maybe it's not what some of them imagine of having access to these huge customers and these great distribution channels globally or whatever.
No, right. In general, I think
it's a very relevant aspect you mentioned here, because that's this is the value proposition you have as a corporate VC, to say, okay, we open our market somehow, our knowledge base and our production facilities, but does it really materialize? In fact, my experience is, to be honest, that this is a good pitch for you always. But at the end of the day, it's quite hard for you to bring the startups in the business units, even in some R&D teams or others. So let's just speak about your daily work, Franziska, for example. If you have a new portfolio company, so how do you manage that? They come, they have expectations, they think you bring millions of revenue probably to the table, and then what are the first steps then to bring your team and the startup together, and to also do some expectation management then?
Yeah, I think Charles has described it quite nicely. But it's exactly what he said. We basically go to the business units and try to find a champion. What we also have in ABB, we have our startup garage, Synerleap. They are based in Sweden, but they are acting globally, and they are really it's their main purpose really to get these relationships on the ground, not only with portfolio companies where we have invested in, but in general with startups. So they have over 100 startups in their ecosystem, and it's really what they do is provide the startups with a partner inside the business units and give them a framework agreement, and then they under this framework agreement they basically can do pilots. They can basically work together in whatever way on a technical cooperation, on a commercial cooperation. It's guided through this Synergy startup garage. But Sven, I also want to give you the chance to talk. Sorry.
Yeah. Sven, so how is it at Saint-Gobain? Is it the same way?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the process. When you look at technologies are global. You can, in many cases, you can use it everywhere. But when a startup, the reality for a startup company, they are local, they are small, they cannot have 20 facilities in different countries. So they are at one place. And the opportunity for them is really to work with the corporation, to learn about the different markets. And when we approach startup companies or get in touch with them, we have a number of discussions. First, what is the technology? How does it fit? And in many cases, we start more like with either materials testing or then a JDA. It's not that you start right away with a licensing or commercial agreement. It's a step-by-step approach, and then you start with one market segment. Sometimes in those markets where the startup company is present, sometimes it's a different market where we believe, oh, this could be a better fit for this specific market, and then we get in touch with our country organization in that market and try to find a way to prepare that product for the market, to help them launch the product, maybe help them to scale up with a given product. It's a step-by-step approach. You wouldn't like invest in a startup company and say, oh, you have a great product and I roll it out worldwide. I mean, we don't even do it with our own products. I mean, you start somewhere and then you expand step by step, and we do the same with products from startup companies. And ideally, we have a combination where we bring in some expertise and the startup brings in some expertise, and then we bundle this up. This usually is the best approach.
And do you have a sponsor in your organization who takes care of the single startup then, and your investment manager as a second person, or how do you deal with it from an organizational aspect?
Yeah, so similar to Franziska and Charles, we also need a champion. We have some money set aside for investments, but we need to have a champion before we invest in a company to make sure this is strategically relevant. So we are also very strategic there. But we don't have to have like a partnership in place. When we see a company and we like the technology, we reach out to the colleagues. And if we find a champion who says, oh, yeah, this is great, and if this really works, because in most cases at that time, it's more an idea and maybe a prototype, but we don't know if the technology will make it all the way to the market. But if we believe in the potential of that technology and have a champion in place, then we consider an investment. We do our due diligence, invest in the company, and usually the champion is taking care of the partnership discussion with our support. And then, I mean, I don't want to repeat myself. You start the process, think about a JDA or some other sort of starting partnership, but that usually comes after the investment. Sometimes it's a parallel process.
Okay. And also for the audience out there, so what needs the startup to bring with? Is it also already some traction in regards to revenue, or only an idea? Or so, Franziska, maybe you again would like to mention what are your search profiles? On the one hand, you said already, but on the other hand, what are the criteria the startup has to match then?
Yeah. No, I mean, just an idea. Obviously, that's not going to make it to our table. So typically, we don't really want to take the technology risk. We do some very early stage, seed stage investments, but but it's not the typical thing. I think typically we invest in Series A, Series B, where the technology has been proven, and then it's a business model risk, right? Or market risk.
Okay, so you do not do any seed investments normally, but you start at Series A then?
Yeah, we do seed investments, and we also have cooperations. Again, Synerleap, our sister organization, they have a lot of collaborations. So when it's not just about investment, but really collaborations, more on the technology R&D area, we have that. We have a lot of that. For investments, we do see stage, but it's rather rare.
Understood. How's it with you, Charles? Your investment criteria?
Yeah, very similar. I always say seed to B, but when on the earlier stage side, very similar to what Franziska was saying. I think an early TRL or low TRL, early stage technology would be a better fit for some of the programs that we have internally around open innovation, right? So maybe we bring it in for to explore further development, further collaboration outside of the traditional equity conversations. In terms of criteria, I mean, what I really like to see, and I think that any startups watching this, they're always wanting insights, right? Like, how can I approach corporates better? It's important. I get bombarded with deal flow, as I'm sure everybody here does. What's important is that the startup does their homework. I don't need a LinkedIn message saying like, "Hey, I've created something," and it's like a form email, right, or a form message, like, "Let's have a conversation," or "Here's a pitch deck." We're a public company. You can see what the awards that we've won. You can see the projects we're working on. You know what our challenges are, and you know the industry challenges. Just a little bit of homework will get you through that just massive emails. It'll move you to the top of the inbox, right, or the top of the priority list. If you say, "Look, I know that, for example, we had an issue with where we did remotely assisted flow calibration witness tests, right? We have a case study out on that." Knowing that these kind of things need to be done, and knowing that given current restrictions, we can't do them in person. If a startup were to come and say, "Hey, I have a technology that can address this, and here's how, here's why, here's where we are," that would be so valuable compared to the kind of generic approach of, "Here's a pitch deck. Can you tell me where we could apply?" I'm not doing the homework for 300 startups. That's kind of their job. So, but yeah, and when it comes to check sizes, or not check sizes, but for the formal investment process, it needs to be a very, very good strategic fit. Like Franziska was saying, we're not going to assume so much of the risk. When it's a great fit, we'll run it through the process. Otherwise, it might be a better fit for an open innovation platform.
Yeah, makes sense. So Sven,
I can't agree more to what Charles just said. I mean, with the startup companies, please do your homework. That is key. You know your technology best, but you need to figure out what do you think could be the fit to a given corporate. If you want to have a corporate there has to be a fit. Think about it. This is important. Of course, we look at the initial deck. But usually you have a best idea how that could fit. I mean, in terms of general criteria, the company should have filed 1 or 2 patents. Usually are not granted. It's too early. We don't expect revenue, but at least the proof of the technology so that they know it works, at least on lab conditions. This is what we are looking at to find the technical fit. But it's really, we need to find the project where we can really successfully work together. I mean, it's a little bit an old phrase with this win-win partnership, but at the end, that's exactly what we are looking for. It should be a benefit for us, of course, but at the same time for the startup company. And we need to find that field. We have to define that project.
Yeah. I think something we also experienced as an investor is when we approach a startup which has a real strong technology, we sometimes have to compete to each other, and it's hard to get in. So what is usually what you would say the startup that you would like to be picked from them? So Sven, what would you say the startup? Please choose me and not Charles, for example, or some others.
Well, I mean, I can maybe as a first comment, when you're looking in our space, mainly materials, but also some digital technologies, there's not that much competition. I know the field of healthcare or software, it sometimes is really different. But in our space, it's usually more on us to form the syndicate. So we like a technology, but we don't want to take all the risk. And then we are looking around in our network who can co-invest with us. But coming back to your question, I think the key is what can we bring to the table? And I think Franziska mentioned this before. Of course, the startups like to take our money. But is this the most important thing? No. If they really have an exciting technology, they would find the money somewhere else. When they engage with a corporation, and now specifically with Saint-Gobain, they're looking for our expertise. Do we have the right expertise for their product, for their technology? Are we present in the right markets? And when we can say, okay, we are present in 70 countries, we have eight R&D centers worldwide in all the key regions. We have manufacturing facilities worldwide. We have a big IP department. It's not, even though we have the board seat at that company, it's not the one board director that knows everything. It's more the 170,000 colleagues behind that person. If we really can provide access to this expertise for the startup company, that really changes the game. And I mean, that's what we are standing for. That's the reputation at least for Nova. When we engage with startup companies, we want to really help them. I mean, of course, if we are an investor, we want to help them. They should be successful, but we have a lot of potential to make them successful.
Makes sense, yeah. So what would you say, Charles, then? The same?
Yeah, I think Sven hit the nail on the head there. I mean, early on, some of the first cases I took before our CTO, one of his questions was, well, what can we do for the startup? I recognize the value they bring to us, but how are we providing something? And it's very, very important for our reputation. You don't want to be viewed as, the IP vampires that just kind of vacuum up whatever they can and either put it on the shelf simply because they have the money to do so, or use it, for their own needs. So that's really important. But also, I guess kind of going back to more things I'd like to see. I think it all ties in, right? But when the startup approaches is true differentiation. We have these verticals that we've all listed. This is what we look at. If I can name 10 companies off the top of my head that will offer me a predictive analytics solution, but not a single page in those decks tells me why one is better than the other. Maybe, a 2% increase in efficiency in one aspect of the production or something like that. But, something that's really grabbing. And I think that's why so many are stuck in this strange limbo of circular emails with various groups, just because it's saturated, right? So they really need to figure out where to go from there. And if they can do that, then we can reciprocate with things like Sven was saying.
We have one further question from the audience. Maybe Franziska, I can ask it to you. The question is whether it's a better approach for the startup coming to, in your case, ABB, through the business unit or the R&D or innovation unit.
Business unit, very clear. Sorry if I'm not eloquent here, but I mean, in our case, especially, we have gone through a huge reorganization, so maybe it's a bit particular, but we have now gone through to a complete holding structure where the business units are now called division, but never mind. We have 18 fully independent, well, not independent, but accountable and responsible business units. They are supposed to drive the business. There is only a very, very thin management layer on the top now. So that's a typical holding organization. The corporate R&D that we had was being pushed into the business. So that's where the music plays.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think one major key takeaway here is for today that the startups really needs to be targeted and they should be very selective when looking for investors because it will dramatically increase their chance to succeed and getting funding. So maybe one last sentence from each of you. What would you like to give the startups on their way for their future development, and especially when it comes to funding rounds. So what is your recommendation in one single sentence? Maybe Sven, you would like to start.
Well, not sure one single sentence, but for the start, I think one point, and I think this is really critical, and Charles made that point. Do your homework, be specific, and when you develop your product, think about what do you want to develop there, and if you need additional financial resources, if you need investors, what specifically do you need it for? This is key. And when you approach a company like Saint-Gobain, you want to say, okay, I have this technology, and I believe this helps you for this product. It will make that product much better, or it will complement your portfolio in that space. And that's why we are the right partner for you. But we need also your financial resources. This is a kind of a pitch, and not, I have a technology, this is great, please give me money. I mean, that would be the other side. You have to be specific, and I mean, for some companies it works. They send out like 1,000 emails to whatever investors, and they get some money. But I would say for most startups, you have to be specific, and you have to explain why you want to have that specific investor on your cap table, and then you have a realistic chance.
Yeah, your recommendation, Franziska?
Yeah, and I jump in because I feel that I'm running out of battery. But I fully agree with Sven. But I would like to add something as a European who lived in the US and now is back in Europe. And I think we are dealing here mostly with European companies. Be persistent. Persistent. I mean, in the US, this is just so much more common that the companies use different channels. But once you have your target and your victim, you know this is the company you are going for. Be persistent, use different channels if it has to be. If you know somebody in business units and it doesn't react, then go through LinkedIn to the venturing or whatever. Use the channels and go back. Even if you don't get a reaction, go back. I mean, in the US, I've seen that so much, how the companies go back in a very polite way. Obviously, like, hey, this is nudging you, or I don't remember the phrases, but but they go back every second or third day. It's business, right? And I think in Europe we are much more. Oh no, they didn't answer, I may wait another 3 weeks. No, don't.
Yeah, no, that's really good. American persistence is notorious, right? I've had startups try to get to me through my wife. So yeah, they don't they don't quit. They'll find a way to get in contact with you. And for my, I guess, closing sentence to a startup is be discerning who you take money from. Talking about funding rounds, I mean, I get it if runway is an issue, lights are going to go off, but just kind of play your funding round like a well-played game of chess, right? Much better than I would probably play it. If you make a move, it may close a lot of doors later, depending on the industry, right? If you talk to Schlumberger, maybe another company is not going to talk to you again after they have that stake in your company. And just from an energy point of view, if you talk to Technip, if you talk to Halliburton, if you talk to whatever, that's going to change your outlook going forward and how you're perceived by other companies. So don't be in a rush to fill up a funding round. Do your homework, talk to people, consider what you're getting into and who you're getting into it with.
Yeah. Maybe a little challenge here. Being persistent is great, but don't start with 25 channels. Try to stick to the same person. Maybe you open a second channel and then be very transparent. I'm contacting you because for whatever reason, but I'm already in touch with that person in your same company, because it's very bad when at some point you find out, oh, there's already a contact. I didn't know it. The startup should mention this immediately. Otherwise, you have a bad reputation very quickly.
And please don't immediately email the chief technology officer.
Because that's the other one.
Because then it's going to come to me anyway, and that's not the right foot to start off on.
No.
I think it was a great panel, very, very valuable insights for the startups out there. I mean, the interesting point here is, I think, that even if you are all from different great and very big corporations, at the end of the day, it's very similar if it comes to processes and how you look to startups and how to filter them and all these things. So, dear startups out there, I think just think about what you have heard for today, and please feel free to contact all of us if you look for funding. And thanks to Alexander and the HIGHTECH Venture team to make this possible, even now in these challenging times. But I think it's also already proven that a virtual table and a virtual stage here can work also quite fine. So thanks to all of you, and wishing you all a great afternoon here in Germany, or good morning in the United States. Goodbye.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.